And now, please welcome founder and CEO of Shorefast and Fogo Island Inn, Zita Cobb, in discussion with Skift Editor-in-Chief, Sarah Kopit.
All right, so you guys are in for a treat today. We are going to talk with Zita Cobb. So Zita, I want you to tell us first and tell all of our audience why you decided to leave Silicon Valley and go home to Fogo Island.
Okay, well, I am an 8th generation Fogo Islander, and no matter where you live on this planet of ours, you probably know that smaller places are having a tough go of it. And I looked at what's happening in my home and thought, I think it's my job to figure out how to put another leg on the economy, but how to do it in a way that strengthens culture, which is, of course, what travel and hospitality can do. Doesn't do much of the time, but can do. So I didn't see a big lineup. It's not your job to come and do that. So that's why I took the money from my career, and being a sane person, I went home and I spent it. That's what money's for.
That's what money is for. And tell everybody where Fogo Island actually is.
Okay, we're going to have a little slide, but it is closer than you think, but we say it's far away from far away. It's New York, where we are today. It's at 40 degrees north. We are at 49.44, so about just over 600 miles, 1,000 kilometers from here to the northeast. Newfoundland and Labrador is the province. We joined Canada in 1949. Many people, including my parents, thought we should join the United States, but you didn't want us, which was a mistake, I think, on your part. Anyway, Canada's okay too. I don't want to say it isn't. And yeah, it's a fishing place, and I actually have some slides. If I push a button, slides are going to come up in a minute. Look, there's you and me. Okay, here we go. This is the inn that we built, and of course, we're going to get to digging into talking about travel and hospitality. Yeah. It always pissed me off to travel around the world and see amazing inns in remote places. And there are parts of the world that do it better than other places that are community-based. And I thought, what is wrong with us that we don't have one of these? Because there's nothing mediocre in any way about this place. So we're going to build an inn. We're going to do it in a way, like our job, my job, your job, all of our job in the present is to mediate the relationship between the past and the future. If you think about humans, because if we're going to talk about hospitality, we got to think about humans. That's where it is. If you think about humans, I haven't met one yet that isn't a physical creature, like we're embodied creatures, which means every night we have to put our head down somewhere. We are social creatures, and we are meaning-seeking creatures. All of those things exist in place. And then we went through this weird kind of a time of thinking that we lived in a global village. Remember that? Nobody lives in a global village. There's no such thing. We live in places. But because of this global village thing, I think we sort of forgot about, we just became place blind. So that's the beauty of travel. That's what it's supposed to be. So here it is. You see we're just about the same latitude as Paris. But what is super important, like geography, everything starts with geography. I probably know more about you by knowing where you grew up than you think I know, if you tell me where you grew up, because it shapes us. And what shapes Fogo Island is, you see where it is there. You see where Iceland is. But that, what's her name, Joanna from JetBlue? I got to convince that woman to stop in Newfoundland on our way to Europe. At the Gander Airport, who has seen Come From Away? That's the Gander Airport. That's what happened there. Anyway, so we are in the Labrador Current, which is one of the coldest currents, ocean currents on the planet. And every year, half of Greenland breaks off and comes down on top of us. So we get pack ice. There's the island. I was saying to Sarah grew up in a place that's 10,000 people.
10,000 people, Milford, Michigan. Woo. Yeah.
Fogo Island is 4 times the size of Manhattan Island. 2,500 people live there. It is overwhelming to come to an island, this island, which has 8 million. Anyway, fishing history, everybody built their house and fished on the coast. Nobody settled in the middle. Still a fishing community. So when we built the inn, it was to complement the fishery.
Yeah, and when Zita says she built an inn, I just, up front I want to share with all of you that it just got, 3 Michelin keys? So just to give you a little idea of what the Fogo Island Inn is like, we're going to dig in more on that a little bit later.
Yeah, the woman who runs the inn said, what's the tire company got to say about us? Anyway, it's a nice thing, but to understand the architecture of the inn, you have to understand the vernacular architecture of the island. These are the kinds of things we built. We built out of wood, we built the inn out of wood as well, and there it is. And it is an act of culture. And I think that's what travel always needs to be.
So who comes and why?
People, well, it's changing all the time, but Americans, about 40% of our business, Canadians 40% and 20% from other places. It's all to do with air access, of course, where there are flights. I mean, these are small communities, and I know I'm going to try and convince Joanna to fly, and she's going to ask me to explain to her how she's going to make money flying to Gander. So we'll come back to that. But the other thing about hospitality and an inn, you see this is a room at the inn. Every single thing you see there, we made it except the stove. But I can tell you where the stove came from. And so how you welcome people, how you put them to bed and care for them and feed them, that is an expression of culture. And I think that is the great promise of travel, especially for smaller communities. Okay, it doesn't want to go any further ahead.
Well, why don't we talk a little bit about what was this year's kind of overarching theme in tourism and travel, unfortunately, which was the pushback against over-tourism. Let's talk about how you feel like the community collaboration, like you said, the beautiful quilt.
The food, the cod, don't forget the cod.
Yes, the cod, the quilt. There you go. It all comes from the local community. Talk about how you think that community involvement can help with that pushback against tourists.
I think there is, we're a little bit disoriented, we humans, at the moment, because there's that star. When we started, I mean, there were 3, not stars, or keys. When we started, none of us had ever done anything in hospitality. And so we started community-wide conversations about how do you do this, and how is it good for us, and how is it good for the visitors. And we learned there are 2 prerequisites to so-called sustainable tourism. I try not to use the word sustainable because then it makes it sound like a noun. It can never be a noun.
Right.
And the 2 are, it cannot be your only industry. If it's your only industry, you're going to have your granny selling trinkets on the corner. And number 2, the scale has to be right for the size of the place. And that's tricky. So we were discussing, for example, how many rooms should the inn have? And a woman in the community said, we are only 2,500 people. We can only love so many people at a time. And so we decided we would make 30 rooms. And then we realized 30 is an even number, like it's closed. We like prime numbers. 29 is an open posture. There's always room in a 29-room inn. And so we built a 29-room inn, and of course that then dictated the business model and the kind of inn. And I know Matthew was talking about the luxury travel. We didn't set out to make a luxury inn, but we could talk a long time about what is luxury.
Yeah.
And it is largely about connection. Like why do people travel? Why should people travel? It's supposed to be a social and cultural and economic phenomena. I think we've lost track a little bit of the social and cultural part of the promise of travel, which is why it all went wrong. And so when we talk about the industry, our industry, we're talking about people's homes. And I think when you see this kind of pushback, is because we're not looking at the world and seeing it as whole. This is from a great book, by the way, called Small is Beautiful. We have to take responsibility for every aspect of impact. And to be fair, so there are different ways to go about doing this, but if you think about society, human societies are built on 3 pillars: markets, industry, governments, and communities. And when they're out of balance, we don't have a good world. I mean, you don't want to live in a world that's all community and never get anything done. You don't want to live in a world that's all business. You'll get a lot done, but it won't be necessarily good. And you don't want to live in a world that's all government, because good grief. I think we're out of balance in the travel sector. I think it's absolutely too driven by the market. And governments are starting to kind of realize they actually have a responsibility, especially local governments. Infrastructure is not there in many cases for welcoming visitors. And communities themselves are starting to figure out, wait a minute, we have a role to play in this. We better stop fighting with each other and get together and figure out, how do we want to welcome people? So I think that's the moment that we're in.
Did you ever have any pushback from locals on Fogo Island about the inn?
Pushback, no. I think everything is Gaussian. When we were starting, I grew up on the island, and so when I came home, as one man said, well, I don't think you came home to make things worse. So that was an expression of trust. I took that. Yeah. But everything is Gaussian. I think that in the beginning, when we were starting, when there was like a lot of conversations, and 10% of the people thought, what is this exactly? And what is it, what has it got to do with me? I don't really understand what it is. I would say 80% of the people thought that. 10% thought, this is the worst thing I ever heard. We don't want more people coming. And 10% thought, wow, this is amazing. And so our job was to go slowly, keep engaged with people in the community, because they own it. Our business model is a bit unusual. And then slowly, as it got built, it actually did happen. And then people could start to see themselves in it. Yeah. We also have a program that we invite everyone from the island to come and stay at the inn, because they own it. So to different models. Yeah. This is maybe a radical model. If someone is part of, as an owner or investor, or working in a big corporate chain, I don't expect you to get up tomorrow morning and put the ownership of the inns and your hotels in the hands of the communities. But I do expect that you can learn from this model, which is radically different. Yeah. So you created Shorefast as a nonprofit, and I'm going to read this, with the goal to create prosperous economies that serve people, nature, and culture in local places. So tell us a little bit about Shorefast and some of its pilot projects that you all are working on. I look at it this way. I said, what are the most important things? Well, obviously nature and culture are the most important things. How do we build economies that support nature and culture? And I think economy not only must do that, can do that. And the way you get to a country, take Canada. Canada has 4,500 incorporated communities. So we are a country that is a community of communities. And you have to be able to start from the ground up and think about your economy and plan top down. So I think we've been missing, as humans, the ground up planning. So we focus on, we want to build an economy that's the sum of its parts. So we focus on local places, and we focus on development, not just investment, but development. And so this is what Shorefast is. As you say, it's a registered charity of Canada. It owns some businesses, doesn't operate the businesses, and it has a whole bunch of programs, the biggest one being art. We build artist studios, we have an artist in residence program. And so our model is that, if I die tomorrow as founder, it doesn't really matter. I don't own it. There's nothing that needs to get cleaned up. The mandate of Shorefast is the well-being of that community. Yeah. We won't go through this, but if somebody wants to take a picture, I'd be happy to talk about it. But I don't understand what development is if it's not developing the potential of people in the places they live and the assets. What is it? So we've got a lot of big players in this room and watching on live stream of hotels and the hospitality industry. How do you convince them, talk directly to them, that this is the way to go, even for the big hotels and the big chains? I think all the hotels, big and small, behind them as owners or operators are people. Yeah. That's the first thing. And I think that this is part of the problem with too much corporate and losing the balance with community and government, because we end up all trapped in kind of cycles of fiduciary duty. You know, if you're the investor and I'm operating the inn, I have to do it, my duty is to you, and it's a legal duty.
Yeah.
I also have a whole bunch of ethical and moral obligations to the place I'm in, but those come second in that kind of a structure. So what I would say is, I don't think there's a choice. I think communities are starting to realize that their quality of life is not enhanced by the way some of this has been going. Yeah. We've sort of forgot about the people in it. I think we're in a collision time of the kind of the digital world and the analog world. We are analog creatures. We're atomic creatures. The world in the physical world, because they're both real. I don't want to say digital world's not real. In the physical world, things are hard. Like people, I think I heard someone say earlier, there was a real concern about how many fewer people are going into the hospitality industry. It's like, I understand why people don't want to work in it the way we're doing it. I absolutely do, because we sort of forgot the people. I think the bits got carried. We can do way more and faster and bigger in the world of bits, but then it all has to land in someone's community, in someone's living room, in someone's life. So we also have to balance the digital and the analog a bit more. So to your question around how do we convince bigger players, I think they're people too. And I think if they look at it, they'll see it. And if they don't see it, they're going to be forced to see it. One of the things that we've pioneered is this: where does the money go? Mm. And so in my lifetime, this happened. We got labeling on food. I don't know why we chose tea. There's nothing in tea, apparently. Anyway, the man who designed this graphic just died recently. He was an American, but it's in the public domain. So we just simply take that and we do what we call an economic nutrition label. This is now trademarked. And we simply tell you where the money goes. We tell you how it breaks down across different cost elements. And we, more importantly perhaps, tell you where it goes geographically. Yeah. So 54% of what you would spend to stay at the inn, which is not a small amount of money, stays on Fogo Island. We also tell you that 53% goes to the people who work there. This kind of radical transparency, we need more of it. So I hope before I'm finished on this planet, more properties will choose to do this kind of labeling. And profit is not a bad thing. It is absolutely not. It's a question of how much and where it goes. We need to get more stickiness with money moving around in places. And so we did a pilot project during the lockdown of the pandemic with 5 other Canadian communities to ask a simple question: how do we strengthen community economies? And we're building a network of community economies, of communities that are really focused on what does it take to build a strong economy. And I mean, the elements won't surprise any business people. We have to attract and retain financial capital, emphasis on retain. We have to come together to collaborate across the different sectors of government, communities, and markets. Data. It's very hard to get community level data, especially for small and medium-sized places, and building local capacity to be ready for welcoming people, for example. And here are these 3 pillars. Please read the book called The Third Pillar. It talks about the importance of communities. He's an economist at the University of Chicago. And I think I said this, but it's just so, nature and culture are the 2 great garments of human life. Yeah. Business and technology. I've heard a lot of talk about technology here, which is fantastic, getting behind nature and culture. And this is the essence of development. And the questions of development in a place is, what do we have? We must have something of value. What do we love? What do we know? What can we do about it? Yeah. And not all investment is development.
So we were talking earlier in the green room, and I hope it's okay that I mentioned, why don't you tell everybody about the tattoo you're thinking about
yes.
getting?
I've gotten to the ripe old age of 66 without one. And, and actually, it's a good slide to be on for this. I'm going to get a tattoo on my face, and it's going to say, "It matters. Who owns what?" Because owners set the business model, and the business models sets the outcomes for people and places. I find this particular slide terrifying to see how much the world of finance has grown. That's a huge amount of money running around the planet looking for a return. That means it's coming to my community and your community and the next community. It matters how they arrive, it matters who they are, and it matters how they work with us and participate. So it's, I love this word geotourism. It's not about like consider the place. It's start with the place, optimize for the place.
So tell me what's next for the Fogo Island Inn, for Shorefast, for Zita. What's coming up?
This. We have to figure out, I mean, all of us, we're all part of this. How do we build a global network of intensely local places? We're all smart enough. We've got lots of technology. If we put place at the center, it would change everything. Communities need to grow into that because, you know, place holds nature and culture.
Yeah.
Everything that we care about is in a place. And culture is nothing more than a human response to a place. How people live and work, some of all of that. Knowledge is culture. And when I talk about place-based communities, it's a shortcut for saying, by the way, that's the pack ice that comes from Greenland. If the economy is not serving place-based communities, well, what's the economy for? And because our sector of travel and hospitality, we're everywhere on the planet. If we're not going to lead this, I don't know who's going to lead it. It's not going to happen. And if we can't figure it out, I think we think we have problems now. We're going to have even more problems. But think about, like, pick any hotel chain. If you're in a place, which you are, I don't know any hotels that are not in places, you are a member of that table that is right there. And that is a privilege. And as travelers, when we go to a new place, I mean, we have to help people see this because we're selling them stuff on their phones all the time that makes you think, oh, I'm going to Italy, I'm getting that gnocchi with that pesto. It's like, never mind that. Arrive. And arrive with tenderness in your heart for a place. Because going to another place, it's like you get to see the world all over again, brand new. And not to have it filled up with stuff we put in our heads before we ever left home. And then we're cranky because we didn't get the right pesto. So I think it's like we have to give place a chance.
Would you ever consider opening another inn?
No, I wouldn't, but I tell you what I am doing. As a part of this network for place-based economies, is helping communities understand the process, because it's a process.
Yeah.
If you're going to build in, what's the name of your hometown?
Milford.
Milford. If we're going to build, well, first of all, we have to figure out, does Milford need one or want one? But let's say Milford needed one. Well, I would be the person you would call our people to say, how should we go about this in a way that is really great for the visitors that are going to come and great for the people who live here? And we can do that. And it might not look like the Fogo Island Inn. And then we've got to figure out who's going to own it.
It matters
who owns what.
All right. Well, we're going to end it there. Thank you, Zita Cobb.
Thank you.